Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be doing the Criminolly speaking tag, and this was created by Ollie over at Criminolly. Be sure to check out his channel if you haven't already. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, this was a very interesting tag, and I really had fun actually thinking about each of the prompts because they were quite challenging. And basically the whole point of the tag is to look at genres and subgenres differently, that they're not clear cuts, that often they overlap and there's merging, and it's just really interesting to choose the books for this tag. Now, I try to do two things. Number one, I try to choose books that I've never spoken about on this channel before, and also I try to choose some South African literature because I haven't done that before. Okay everyone, the first prompt is a horrifying book that isn't horror. Now, this is going to be my first South African entry. It's a really worldwide successful South African author, actually born in Zambia. But he's prolific and he has sold millions and millions of copies of his books, and that is Wilbur Smith. And I'm choosing in particular Dark of the Sun because I think that is his darkest, most horrifying book. Now he writes under sort of adventures and thrillers, that's what he's known for, with a little bit of love story thrown in, but some of his books, in fact a lot of his books, are very dark. I've got an example of a couple of his other novels that I own, Birds of Prey, as well as Warlock, because he doesn't write just about Africa, he writes about Egypt as well. And a lot of his writing, especially when it's centered in Africa, is very cruel, and in this particular case with The Dark of the Sun, it is absolutely brutal, and it is very violent. And this particular book is set in the heart of Africa, in the Congo, in the Belgian Congo at that time. And as I said, it is graphic, it is not for the faint of heart. There are even sort of cannibalistic tribes are running around, and Wilbur Smith does not hold anything back. So just be warned, people hacked to death, and he does not hold back. Okay, the second prompt is, name a book with a terrible crime that isn't a crime novel. Now I've actually got two entries here. The first one I've actually had mentioned before on my channel, very briefly, and that is the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever. And it's basically the first book in the first Chronicles, which is a trilogy, and it's Lord Fowle's Bane. What happens is Thomas Covenant finds himself in this land, and he's a leper, and he basically commits a terrible crime in the very first chapter or two, and this lingers long into the rest of the series, and his feelings of guilt and inadequacy. He's a very unlikable protagonist. And if you haven't picked this up, it's well worth a try if you love fantasy. It's dark fantasy, no, it's more high fantasy, but to be serious with you, it's pretty dark, and some of the subject matter is pretty dark. Okay, the second one is a South African entry, and this is a deeply disturbing political satire. It's darkly hilarious. I don't think anyone will find it too funny now in this day and age, but it is Riotous Assembly by Tom Sharp. Now, this is actually a British author who travelled to South Africa to study at Rhodes University, and he wrote this book, the satire of the South African government during apartheid. And this book is just crazy, and it's over the top, and I think most people will see it in pretty bad taste right now. I do remember finding it really kind of funny when I was younger, and I'm surprised that I actually got hold of a copy because they were banned. But the crime in this particular book is right at the beginning, where this woman murders her servant, her cook, and then it just a whole lot of events afterwards, and it makes fun of the police, makes fun of the government, and yeah, I don't think I'd be laughing about it now, and I don't think I recommend it to anyone. And what actually happened to the author, I mean, he writes very well, Tom Sharp, but he went back to England. He was basically imprisoned in the early 70s because of his writing, because of his satire, and then he was deported. So he was sent back to Britain, and then he continued to write satire about the British. So if you're going to read him, I would basically say rather pick up those books. This one is just a little bit too much. That is Riotous Assembly. The third prompt says, a book about love that isn't a romance. And I've got 2 entries for this as well. I don't have a copy of either of them. The first one, some people consider it a kind of a romance. I think that's pushing it a bit too far. It's more like a fantasy vampire story, and it's called Sunshine by Robert McKinley. Now, I read this when I was much younger and I really enjoyed it. I don't know if it's aged very well, if I pick it up again, but it's basically the story of this love, or this very strong friendship and bond between a vampire and this girl, or this woman who's basically captured by these vampires. Now this vampire doesn't go after human flesh, and he's actually dying, as far as I remember, and they just create this real bond. And so it's kind of a love story, but as we know, there are different kinds of love. There's maternal love, there's a love that 2 people have for each other, there's a love between brothers, brotherly love. I suppose there's a sort of best friend love, and that's what I would classify this as. But look, it's a sweet story. The vampire is gross, he's not sparkly. So this particular book, don't think of it as a Twilight or anything like that. But yeah, I enjoyed the story then. I'm not sure if I'd enjoy it now. Okay, for the second book, South African entry. Now, I am going for Jock of the Bushveld by Sir Percy Fitzpatrick. And the reason I'm doing that is because when I say the different kinds of love, this book revolves around the love that a man has for his dog. And it tells the story of Jock, who is in the South African bushveld, and he goes with his master on hunting, and they basically survived when, I think it's in the Kruger National Park. And just to warn you, it's also very graphic. And although it's a beloved children's classic, there are graphic scenes of animal harm, and also it is most definitely a product of its time. There are racial slurs, so this book is not for anyone that is sensitive about those things. I know that there's a revised edition. I think the original edition was a lot worse, but still it is a timeless tale of a love between this man and his dog in the African bushveld. Okay, prompt number 4 is a book with a puzzle that isn't a mystery. Now I had to think long and hard about this because it's actually quite a tricky one to get right. And I've come up with The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. Now this is one of maybe a handful of classics that I absolutely adored. And the reason that it's on this list, and the reason that I say it is a puzzle, is because the whole damn book is a puzzle. And the first part, it's divided into 4 different parts. And the first part is disorientating, stream of consciousness, absolute craziness. You have absolutely no idea what's going on. And you have to keep reading. And each part it's about this family called the Compton family. And each part tells a different perspective from a different member of the family. That's basically a Southern Gothic family that falls apart or falls to ruin. And you don't really know much about what's happening until the end, when the different strands sort of come together. So that in that way it's most definitely a puzzle. I have to add that this is possibly one of the most depressing, disturbing, heartbreaking, really soul-destroying books that I've ever read. You learn some things about this family, and some of the stuff is just wrong. But still, it's a very powerful read. And I know that if I hadn't studied it at university, I probably wouldn't have got past the first section with the whole stream of consciousness. You're inside this young boy's mind, and he's basically, I don't know what the right way to say it is, intellectually impaired, but quite seriously. You know, he doesn't have any idea about time and concepts of time, and you're inside his head with these thoughts, and you know, you'll be thinking something and then you'll just suddenly switch to something else. So reading the first few pages, you really honestly, you're frustrated and you're disorientated, and I think that's exactly what Faulkner wanted to do. You keep reading, and then second, I'm not normally into books like this where there's a strange narrative structure, where also time doesn't go linearly, but this book is powerful, and if you can push your way through it, really, it hits you. That is the sound and the fury. Okay, the fifth prompt is a book with magic that isn't a fantasy. Now I've come up with 2 responses for this one as well, and I'm going to start not so much a novel but more a play, and we're talking here about Macbeth, William Shakespeare. And I just want to show off my very ancient, very tatty Shakespeare with a cover. If I take that off, yeah, it's absolutely ancient, and I actually bought it like this, and it's been a really tough thing just keeping the book together. But that's a complete works of Shakespeare. Now, Macbeth, as you know, finds these witches, and we're talking about black magic here. But there's magic, where the witches tell him, foresee the fact that he's going to be king, and the whole play basically unravels after that prediction. So yeah, that's the first one, Macbeth. Okay, secondly, Mirror from Graham Masterton. Now, I don't want to say too much about this book, except it is about a mirror that magically is a portal to an alternative universe, alternative world. And I don't want to give anything else about the plot away, because I actually plan on reviewing this book quite soon. So yeah, Mirror by Graham Masterton is my second choice. Prompt number 6 says, a book that thrilled you that isn't a thriller. Okay, now this is going to be my final South African entry, and possibly one of my favorite books of all time. Okay, definitely made my top 20 or top 30, and that is The Power of One by Bryce Courtney. And this is actually semi-autobiographical, because the author went through similar experiences in his lifetime. And it's about a young boy who's brought up by a black nanny. The time is 1939, sort of the onset of apartheid and also World War II. And he moves to a boarding school and gets away from this lovely life he has he's out in the boondoes, out in the middle of nowhere, and he has to go to this boarding school. And it's pretty much predominantly an Afrikaans boarding school. And he's a white English boy, only 5 years old at the time. And he is ridiculed and bullied at this school, horrendously bullied. And he's given the name PK. And I think South Africans will know what that is, but I'm not going to say anything about that. But that's his name, PK. And it's about his adventures and how he finds hope. He learns how to box. Don't really want to talk too much about the story. I just want to say that it is thrilling, it is exciting, and yeah, it's a wonderful historical coming of age story, and well worth your time. That is The Power of One. Okay, now we come to the last prompt, and that is a book with science that isn't science fiction. Now this is an interesting one, because I know this author is quite controversial. People call him a terrible writer, and his ideas are badly researched, and he's been called all sorts of things. That is Dan Brown's, Angels and Demons. Now, I read Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code. I chose Angels and Demons because it's primarily around the battle, or the thing between science and religion, science versus religion. And I found it, no matter what the critics say, I found it a very entertaining read. I don't see that he writes that badly. It's no classic literature. It's not the most outstanding writer that I've ever read, but it's an entertaining book, and it's fiction and it's fun. So I'd highly recommend it. So yeah, that is Dan Brown's Angels and Demons to finish off. So those are my responses to the genre speaking tag, and I really enjoyed it. Thanks to Ollie for creating it quite a while ago. I'm not going to tag anyone. I don't know who's done the tag, who's not done the tag, and it was a bit tricky. It took me quite a while to think of these responses, but if you are interested, let's pay it forward and do the tag, and I'll be interested to see who follows up from this. Yeah, so if you enjoyed this content, please be sure to like and subscribe, and leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought of my responses. Thank you so much, take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.